Okay,
So
so today we're having what feels like part two of a conversation that we had part one with our friend Jess Ely back in December of 2019. So this is like the longest like part two that's ever come about. But some new language has come up around this conversation, and we just wanted to chat about it.
yeah, so I was watching a TikTok of all things, which I don't actually think was developed for TikTok, but that's besides the point. It
Mhm.
was a clip of Mel Robbins talking, and she was talking about bias, and she was specifically talking about the bias towards action or towards thinking.
Mhm.
And I watched the whole thing and I was like, this is the be or doer thing. This
Yeah.
is the be or doer thing. And so I sent it to Emily immediately. And then I was like, okay, well, I think what's really helpful here is oftentimes when you have expressed a feeling, but you don't have the words that like other people are using, it can be really isolating.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so saying you're a beer or a doer likely only makes sense if you're like in our world or you know who
And
Jesse
you
Lee
know what
is.
that's
Like
about.
it's
Mhm.
not necessarily a commonly accepted thing. But the way she was talking about it leads me to believe there is a lot of scientific study around these biases. And the thing that was alarming enough for me to want to do a part two so many years later was there was this essentially scientific background about how if you have a bias towards action, you're more likely to be happier,
Yeah.
healthier, and more successful. And I was
Mhm.
like, oh, so what does that mean for other types of bias? And I'm wondering, and this is not necessarily something we're challenging on a scientific level, but knowing that you and I have slipped back and forth between both, do you think someone who has a bias towards thinking can have a bias towards action? And do you think they could use that as a lever, like turn themselves into an action taker? And that's the part that I really want to focus on, because I think what I get I get frustrated with when we look at, I mean, anything, honestly. Whether you're talking about a diagnosis like ADHD, or you're talking about depression, or, I mean, anything. Like, why do all of these things that describe how we act psychologically have to all of a sudden have an angle towards something negative? And like, what's the positive spin we can take? And is there a way that if we do prefer how something could benefit us, is there a way to like manipulate our mind and like change how we act?
Well, I love this conversation, and I find it so interesting because over the years I have shifted from being an action taker to being a thinker in different parts of my life. Like I've ebbed and flowed. And Jess Ely gives her example in that podcast where it has a bias towards thinking, or she's a beer in her terms, and that's who innately she is as a person. Well, in order for her to start taking action, her belief is that beers have to believe something about themselves first before they
Mm-hmm.
will take action.
Mm-hmm.
And what Mel Robbins is saying is that when you are uncertain and you're unsure and you lead towards thinking or in away from doing is where you will like get stuck and where you will create a habit of just overthinking. If you've called
Right.
yourself an overthinker, that's where you are, right? And it could be about anything. But Jess gave the example about how she wanted to transition out of the just the beer. And she wanted to try to believe something about herself in order to believe that she was an action taker. And so she started super tiny. Like, I don't think we can like eat the frog here. It like has to be super tiny. So she started literally with just a habit of flossing every day. She wanted to floss every day. And she told herself, if I floss every day, then all of a sudden I'm taking action on the thing that I say that I'm going to do. And I become someone who does what she says she's going to do. And I think that's the critical element here. How can you teach yourself and create the habit within yourself to become someone who says they're going to do what they either need to do or what does what they say they're going to do?